The Forbidden Sound. Meera was 13 when she first heard the song that would change everything. It wasn't music in any traditional sense, no melody, no rhythm, just a deep, haunting hum that seemed to rise from the canyon floors beyond Ellora Station like a heartbeat carried on the wind. While other children her age collected digital trinkets and practiced their holographic lessons, Meera wandered the rusted edges of the colony wall. Her pack was always full of stolen tools, her left leg bore a slight limp from an old accident, and her heart carried a hunger the sterile world around her refused to satisfy: wonder. The older settlers spoke in hushed warnings about the canyons. Unstable ground, they'd mutter. Radiation pockets. Old imperial ruins down there, half buried and sealed for good reason. But Meera had lived 13 years in a colony that felt like a suffocating box, where every rule was stacked upon another, and every truth was spoken through gritted teeth. Her father had died in a mining accident no one ever mentioned again. Her mother worked the hydro tanks in perpetual silence. Everyone told Meera not to ask questions, not to remember, not to dig deeper into the past. So naturally, she dug. On the 5th morning of winter break, when the colony's maintenance clock signaled the daily solar system check, Meera slipped through a gap in the western ridge fence. The mysterious hum called to her, growing stronger with each step she took toward the forbidden canyons. The trail led her to a half-buried spillway, where a broken irrigation pipe jutted from a concrete wall like the mouth of some forgotten deity. Water leaked slowly from its base, pooling into a stagnant trench that reflected the pale morning light. Dropping her pack, Meera squeezed through the pipe's opening, scraping her palms on the rusted rim. The pipe opened into a tunnel, half-submerged, and breathing mist and dust into the stale air. Silence enveloped her except for the steady dripping of water somewhere in the darkness ahead. Yet the deeper she walked, the more present the mysterious hum became, resonating in her ribcage like an ancient lullaby trying to remember its own words. Her wrist lamp's beam danced across moss-covered stone and rusted panels. The air smelled of metal and time, as if years had drowned in this place and left only their bones behind. Then she saw them, chains. Not thin restraints, but massive links thick as her torso, glowing faintly with runes she couldn't read. They were fused into the walls and disappeared into the flooded floor like the roots of something impossibly ancient, stretching from the tunnel's far end into the black water where something large and still waited in the shadows. The Guardian's voice. At first, Meera thought the shadows were playing tricks on her eyes. Then her light caught on something that made her breath catch: silver fur, wet and clinging to muscle as thick as armor. A massive, wolf-like form lay coiled beneath the dark water, breathing so shallowly it barely disturbed the surface. Its eyes were closed, and a chained muzzle rested atop its enormous paws. Heart hammering, Meera stepped forward and whispered, "Hello." The creature's eyes opened, not with anger or hunger, but with recognition. They were golden, like captured sunlight, and when they locked onto hers, something inside her chest cracked open. She didn't scream or run. Instead, she whispered again, softer this time, "What are you?" The creature blinked slowly, water rolling off its snout. In a voice so low it barely disturbed the air, it said, "You shouldn't be here." But it wasn't a threat, it was a warning, spoken like someone who still believed she had choices to make. Meera returned the next day, soaked and shaking, her heart still echoing with the memory of that voice, the first voice in years that had spoken to her like she mattered. Logic screamed at her to stay away. The colony's curfews were strict, the fences were now under surveillance, and the underground tunnels had been marked off limits by both civic law and imperial ordinance. But nothing had ever felt more right than crawling back through that pipe, down into that profound silence, toward the being who had dared to speak words of genuine concern. This time she brought offerings, a portable lantern, a metal thermos filled with heated broth, and her father's broken hollow recorder, the one she always tinkered with when sleep wouldn't come. She waded through the shallow water, stepping carefully over roots and debris until she reached the great coils of silver fur. The creature hadn't moved, but its golden eyes opened when she arrived. "I came back," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I don't know why. I just needed to." I know, it replied, its voice like distant thunder that refused to cause harm. Who did this to you? She asked, stepping closer to examine the massive chains. The creature was quiet for a long moment. Then it turned its head slowly, carefully, as if its very bones remembered how long they'd been still. I did. Meera blinked in confusion. What? I asked them to, the wolf continued. The chains groaned as he shifted position, sending ripples across the tunnel walls. I made a promise, to guard what could not be forgotten, and to sleep until someone worthy of remembering found it again. The weight of truth. Meera swallowed hard, her curiosity overriding her fear. What is it? What are you guarding? The wolf lowered its massive head, and behind him, the tunnel extended deeper into darkness, flooded and humming faintly with a power that didn't feel like energy. It felt like memory itself, ancient and patient. You'll know when you see it, the wolf whispered, his voice carrying a weight that made her bones ache. But you will not leave dry-eyed. Something about the way he said it chilled her blood, yet her heart raced with something warmer, terror laced with awe, like standing at the edge of a cliff and feeling both the fear of falling and the thrill of flight. She sat beside him on the edge of a broken pipe, cross-legged, sharing her thermos without asking if he could eat or drink. He didn't move to take it, but he lowered his great head beside her. For the first time since she was small, Meera felt truly safe, not because she was alone, but because she wasn't. Not anymore. The third time Meera came to the tunnel, she didn't bring tools or questions. She brought only herself and a determination that felt heavier than her own heartbeat. The wolf's words had burrowed under her skin, whispering to her in dreams she couldn't quite remember upon waking. She hadn't told anyone about her discovery. No one would believe her, not the hydro workers, not her teachers, not her mother who barely made eye contact anymore. But she knew something profound was waiting in that flooded darkness. And it wasn't just a mystery, it was her story, somehow. The tunnel behind the chained guardian was narrower than she'd expected, angling almost unnaturally as if it had been grown by intention rather than carved by tools. Meera had to crouch, then crawl through the flooded corridor. The water was colder here, biting into her knees and elbows, soaking through her clothes as she pushed forward through darkness. The Garden of Echoes. Meera waded closer, her legs numb from the cold, her eyes burning with desperate need to understand. The first pod she approached made her world collapse. It contained a face. Her face. She froze, unable to breathe. It wasn't similar, it was exact. The same curve of nose, the same small scar above the left eyebrow that she'd gotten falling from a lift rail at age 5. Even the same birthmark near her neck that she'd always hidden beneath her collar. Stumbling backward into the frigid water, she turned to find the next pod. Her face again. And the next. And the next. Each one slightly different, some younger, some older, some with longer hair or fainter freckles, some with expressions of fear frozen in their sleeping features like trapped nightmares. Meera's knees gave out. The cold didn't matter anymore. Tears came sudden and fierce, pouring from a place inside her she hadn't known existed. She clutched at her stomach, falling sideways against one of the pods, which pulsed beneath her hand like a heart caught between sleep and death. Then the whisper returned, not from the wolf, not from her own mind, but from the walls themselves, speaking in a language she couldn't understand but felt in her bones. Seedline Meera, Generation 304. Error, conscious deviation exceeded. Termination order rescinded by unknown guardian protocol. She screamed, but there was no echo in that place of memories. Only silence, and the patient pulsing of 1,000 sleeping selves. When Meera finally emerged from the flooded corridor hours later, she looked less like a child and more like someone who had seen the end of the universe and somehow found the strength to walk back. The wolf was waiting, his golden eyes reflecting her devastation. Now you know, he said gently. You are the first of your line to achieve true consciousness, to question, to rebel, to choose your own path. The others were recycled when they failed to develop beyond their programming. Programming? Her voice was barely a whisper. This colony, this world, it's a testing ground. Humanity thought it lost, but some survived by becoming something else. They've been trying to recreate the original human spirit, the spark that makes your species truly alive. You, Meera, are their greatest success and their greatest threat. She stared at the massive creature who had watched over this terrible secret for so long. How long have you been here? 3,000 years, by your reckoning. I was the last of my kind, and I made a bargain with the creators, to guard their work until one like you emerged. Someone who could choose what to do with this knowledge. What am I supposed to choose? The choice of echoes. The wolf's chains began to glow brighter, responding to some invisible signal. You can destroy it all, the pods, the facility, the endless cycle of failed attempts. Or you can take what you've learned and build something new. The choice was always meant to be yours. Meera looked back toward the chamber of sleeping faces, then at the ancient guardian who had sacrificed millennia of freedom for this moment. What happens to you? My vigil ends either way. I have kept my promise. His voice carried the weight of ages, but also something lighter, relief, perhaps. Or hope. She thought of her mother, working in silent grief. Of the other colonists, living their prescribed lives without ever knowing they were echoes of something greater. Of all the Meeras who had come before, who had failed to break free from the patterns written into their very cells. There's a third choice, she said slowly. I could wake them up. All of them. Not destroy them, but give them what I have, the ability to choose. The wolf's eyes widened with something that might have been surprise. That was never considered. The risk is mine to take. Meera stood, water streaming from her clothes. You've been alone for 3,000 years, guarding dead things and broken dreams. Maybe it's time for something different. She waded back into the chamber, approaching the central control panel that had been humming quietly beneath the water. The runes responded to her touch, and she felt the facility's ancient systems awakening around her like a creature stretching after an impossibly long sleep. One by one, the pods began to open. One by one, her other selves began to breathe. Years later, the colony of New Allura would be known across the galaxy as the strangest settlement in human space, a place where people who shared faces but not dreams worked together to build something unprecedented. Where questions were welcomed instead of feared, and where the old imperial warnings about dangerous ruins had been replaced with stories of wonder. Meera often returned to the canyon, though the tunnel was different now, filled with light and laughter as her awakened sisters discovered their own paths. The wolf no longer slept in chains. His vigil complete, he had chosen to stay, becoming the colony's protector and the keeper of their remarkable story. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, Meera could still hear that original song humming beneath the canyon floors. But it was different now, not lonely or haunting, but rich with harmony. The sound of consciousness awakening, of choices being made, of a future being written by hands that had learned to be free. She had found her wonder at last, and in sharing it, had given birth to more wonders than she could have ever imagined alone. The end.